Alright, today we're going to talk about something that I think, in my opinion at least, is a little bit underrated in terms of Zenless Zone Zero, and that is the Defender class of units. Now, I do kind of understand why it's so underrated. I mean, we only have Ben as the Defender, but Seth is coming out soon, and of course we have Caesar being announced as 1.2's S-rank Defender, right? But as a staunch Ben enjoyer myself, and soon to be Seth enjoyer, and absolutely a Caesar enjoyer, I cannot sit idly by and watch as everybody trash talks Defenders. So for now, I'd like to go over some of the many complaints that there are of the Defenders and sort of give my case as to why I think they're actually pretty good. The starting off is Defenders do no damage. And for this, I think the obvious answer is, well, of course, they're a Defender. They're not supposed to do damage. But I think the reason why people say this is that at the end of the day, the end game content, which is typically your shield defense, it all comes down to DPS races, right? How quickly can you finish the stage? The more damage you have, the better. And Defenders, if they're not contributing damage, they're not making you clear any faster, right? But here's where I would like to say that, again, they're Defenders. They're not supposed to do damage. But in my opinion, Defenders are sort of a combination of support units and stun units. And I mean, supports don't really do that much damage, and neither do stun units as well. So of course, I'm going to be referring to Ben mostly throughout this video because, again, he is the only Defender we have. Although Seth is, technically speaking, not really available, but we can see his kit and we've been able to play with him a bit in patch 1.1. And I will go a bit more in depth about Seth in just a bit, but for the most part, when I talk about Defenders, I am referring to both Ben and Seth. But otherwise, yeah, the easier of the two roles to liken the Defender class to is support, right? They provide a buff to the team essentially. Ben provides a big crit buff to the team, and of course they both provide shields to the team, but a crit buff is very nice. And I mean, it's not even like a bad amount. It's like a 16% I think increase to your crit rate, which is pretty decent. I feel like in games like Honkai Star Rail, if you had a support that just gives an unconditional 15% crit rate, everyone would say, oh, it's a great unit, oh, it's so good. And then of course we have Seth, who provides anomaly proficiency to the team as his sort of support passive. And then when it comes to stunning, yes, I will admit that Ben is definitely slow to stun if you try and on-field him because, I mean, he's a big bear. It's not exactly as graceful and fast as Lycan or Anby. That's why I think a lot of their stun damage is backloaded onto their parries. So it's also nice that for the most part, it seems like the Defender units all have the 1-point parry. What I mean by that is that sometimes, you know, you have those very big attacks, in which case, if you try to parry with any other unit, it takes up 2 points of the 6 that you normally have. Whereas some units like Sokaku, or notably Ben and Seth, are able to parry these with only 1 point. So you're able to get in more of those parries to get off that stun damage, because if you're not going to be able to stun a unit using Ben with his regular attacks, even though his M6 does technically speaking provide a boost to his stun after a counter. So yes, of course, they don't do any damage, but they help support the team, and they technically speaking give a damage boost by, you know, stunning an enemy, albeit not as fast as a dedicated stunner, and their support being not as impactful as a dedicated support unit. So that brings me on to the next point, like, what do you do with them? Do you just then parry and then that's it? And for the most part, that's more of a Ben issue than a Defender issue, because right now, on-field stunners, like let's say Anby, can do well since they are, well, you know, constantly on the field and constantly being able to apply days. Whereas with Defenders, you really rely on those parries to get those days off, like I said. And with Ben, it does make it a bit weird and awkward to do, because once he does parry, technically speaking, if you want to get at least some decent chip damage in, or like get some usage out of him with his EX skill to get the shield up as well, you need to use his EX skill as a counter, so wait to get attacked again. So you kind of want to keep Ben on the field long enough to get off that counter attack on his EX skill, but when you think about it, that next attack that you're using to counter, you could have, technically speaking, gone back to your attacker and then had Ben parry that again. Well, to be fair, again, his EX skill does also do a nice bit of days as well if you do get that counter off. Seth, I think, will just highlight this even more, the concept of, you know, just being a parry unit, as well as also just being a pseudo support unit as well. Because after you parry with Seth, he now also is able to give off a quick assist himself, which before only supports could do that. So now having a Defender unit be able to trigger a quick assist can really change things up. And also the fact that Seth has it go to the previous unit, so you can order it that you have like support slot 1, your DPS or whatever slot 2, and then Seth slot 3, so that no matter what, any quick assist will always be triggered to that middle unit. So the support goes forward into your attacker, or Seth can go backward into your attacker as well, which I don't know, I just find that really cool. But like I said though, this just gives more of that concept of being a parry bot. You know, you're on your attacker, they're about to be hit, you parry with Seth, and then immediately go back into your attacker unit with the quick assist again. But speaking of like the team order and stuff, let's talk about the available teams right now, specifically for Ben. Ben really only has like two teams, I would say. Both of them being monofire. There's the Collider Ben Lucy team, as well as the Soldier 11 Ben and Lucy team. And the issue with this is that, firstly, with the Collider Ben Lucy team, you don't have a dedicated attacker. So again, we're coming around to they do no damage. So you're relying on Collider, who admittedly does get some attack boost thanks to the, the Ben Collider sort of combo attack, which I think is really cool. They should do that more. Otherwise, the other team, which I prefer and use myself, is the Soldier 11 Ben and Lucy team. And the issue here is that, technically speaking, one of the other premium teams is Soldier 11, Piper, and Lucy, where it's sort of like a disorder team essentially, where Soldier 11 and Lucy apply burn, and then Piper can trigger assault. So in my opinion, what Ben does is he sort of enables like a third type of playstyle of teams. The first playstyle is the traditional attacker, stunner, support. So think of like Shuyen, Anbi, Nicole, or say Ellen, Lycan, Sokaku, right? Most of the time, the enemy is not yet stunned, you're using your stunner on field. Once they are stunned, you're going to switch to your attacker and then just do a bunch of burst DPS on them, right? The second type of team is the anomaly team or the disorder team, which is kind of like the Soldier 11 Piper Lucy team, where for the most part you have two units that are sort of equally on field so that they can both apply their respective elements anomaly. But this sort of third type of playstyle, which I'm going to dub like a hyper carry team, is what Ben's team is, the Soldier 11 Ben and Lucy team, where because Ben is essentially a pseudo support, only really coming in for the parries and whatnot, Soldier 11 is on field 90% of the time. She is, like I said, the hyper carry of the team, which I really like. She's the fancy S rank, so surely she should get the most field time, especially because after playing the Soldier 11 Piper Lucy team myself, I wasn't really a fan of switching into Piper to prep the assault, especially because of how vulnerable she is while spinning. But again, that's just a personal preference. I will admit it is kind of ironic to say that Ben is good because I barely have to use him on field and I get to play with Soldier 11 more. But enough talk about Ben though, let's talk about the, well, not the elephant in the room, but the links in the room, I guess, Seth. I'll be honest, after trying him out in the, like, that little story mission, I'm more excited for Seth than I am for Jane, honestly. I think Seth is going to open up a lot of people's eyes to the joy of defenders and how useful they are. I think one, because of the fact that he is almost essentially going to be the enabler for the disorder team with, like, let's say, Grace, Seth, and Jane, right? Like, that's almost guaranteed to be the go-to team, right? But I think Seth will also fix a lot of the issues that people have with Ben. First off is attack scaling, right? Ben's biggest issue, I think, is the fact that he is scaling off of defense. It is kind of alleviated by the fact that his passive gives a portion of his defense to his attack, and also his signature engine gives him a big damage chunk based on his defense as well. But honestly, if you play properly, you shouldn't be getting hit at all. So all that defense is pretty much wasted. So aside from that signature engine, you could arguably just invest on full attack really with Ben. It would have been cool if his multipliers actually scaled off of his raw defense, kind of like how in Honkai Star Rail you can have attack scaling off other stats. But yeah, Seth being actually an attack scaling character makes that a lot better now. I still don't think he'll do that much damage, but it'll at least make building him a lot nicer now. Like, we'll have better discs for him, essentially. I do think it is going to be a bit of a pity that Seth is sort of going to be strong-armed into being a anomaly support, essentially, where it's like, if you don't run a disorder team, Seth is pretty much not really that great. Otherwise, though, with Seth on the horizon and Caesar also looming even a bit further down the horizon, defenders are definitely, I think, going to be in for a big glow-up in terms of the opinion from the Zenless Zone Zero community. But otherwise, yeah, hopefully, though, I could have swayed your opinion at least on defenders. Yes, they are in a bit of an awkward spot right now, but they are by no means bad at all. As usual though, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts though. What do you think about defenders? Leave them down in the comments below, and while you're at it, consider liking and subscribing. I would greatly appreciate that. But otherwise, until next time, bye bye.